Rumpole and the Married Lady. Life at the bar has its ups and downs, and there are times when there is an appalling decrease in crime, when all the decent villains seem to have gone on holiday to the Costa Brava and lawfulness breaks out. At such times, Rumpole is unemployed, as I was one morning when I got up late and sat in the kitchen dawdling over breakfast in my dressing gown and slippers, much to the annoyance of she who must be obeyed. I was winning my daily battle with a tormented mind who writes the Times crossword, when Hilda, not for the first time in our joint lives, compared me unfavourably with her late father. Daddy got to Chambers dead on 9 every day of his life. Your old dad, old C.H. Whiston, got to Chambers dead on 9 and spent the morning on the Times crossword. I do it at home. That's the difference between us. You should be grateful. I want you out of the house, Rumpole. Don't you understand that, so I can clear up the kitchen? Oh, woman, in our hours of ease, uncertain, coy, and hard to please. Hilda doesn't like poetry. I can tell by her heavy sigh. Just a little peace, so I can be alone to get on with things. I really don't know why you bothered to come home at all. Now Nick's gone, it seems quite unnecessary. Nick? It was a year since Nick had gone to America, and we hadn't had a letter since Christmas. Well, you know what I mean. We used to be a family. We had to try at least for Nick's sake. Oh, why don't you go to work? Nick'll want to come back sometime. To see us. You want to hear all our news. What I've been doing in court, I said, giving Hilda her opening. What you've been doing in court? You haven't been doing anything in court. At which moment the phone rang in our living room. It was my new clerk, the energetic Henry. He wanted me to come into Chambers for a conference, and I asked him if the world had come to its senses and crime was back in its proper place in society. No, he told me, as a matter of fact, it wasn't crime at all. I put down the telephone and gave Mrs. Rumpole a look which I hoped was enigmatic. It's a divorce, I told her. As I walked through the temple, puffing a small cigar on the way to the factory, I considered the question of divorce. Well, you've got to take what you can nowadays, and I suppose divorce is in a fairly healthy state. Divorce figures are rising. What's harder to understand is the enormous popularity of marriage. I remembered the scene at breakfast that morning, and I really began to wonder how marriage ever became so popular. It was a relief to get down to the temple for relaxation. By the time I'd reached my chambers, number 1, Equity Court, a place of peace and quiet, it already felt like home. When I got into the hallway, I opened the door of the clerk's room and was greeted by an extraordinary sight. A small boy, I judged him to be about 10 years old, was seated on a chair beside Diane, our typist. He was holding a large, lit-up model of a jet aeroplane and zooming it through the air at a noise level which would have been quite unacceptable to the New York Port Authority. I shut the door and bid a hasty retreat to the privacy of my sanctum. But when I opened my own door, I was astounded to see a youngish female seated in my chair, wearing horn-rimmed specs and apparently interviewing a respectable middle-aged lady. With them was a man who gave every appearance of being an instructing solicitor. I shut that door also and turned to find the zealous Henry crossing the hall toward me, bearing a most welcome object in my small world, a brief. "Henry," I said in some panic, "there's a woman seated in my chair." Miss Phillida Trant, sir. She's been with us for the last few months, ex-pupil of Mr. Erskine Brown. You haven't met her?" I searched my memory. I've met the occasional whiff of French perfume on the stairs. Miss Trant's anxious to widen her experience. Hence the French perfume. She wants to know if she can sit in on your divorce case. I've got the brief here. Thrip versus Thrip. You're the wife, Mr. Rumpole. Oh, am I? Jolly good. Oh, I don't know if you're aware of it, Henry. There seems to be a child in the clerk's room with an aeroplane. It's the child of the family in Thrip versus Thrip, and I rather gather the chief bone of contention. So long now, Mr. Rumpole. Miss Phillida Trant, did you say? Yes, sir. You don't mind her sitting in, do you? Oh, couldn't you put her off, Henry? Tell her a divorce case is sacrosanct. It'd be like a priest inviting a few lady friends to join in the confessional. But Henry had disappeared into the clerk's room. So there I was 10 minutes later at my desk having a conference in a divorce case with Miss Phillida Trant sitting in. Mr. Perfect, the solicitor, looking grave, and the client, Mrs. Thrip, leaning forward and regarding me with gentle, trusting eyes. She seemed an extremely nice and respectable woman, and I wasn't to know that she was to cause me more trouble than all the murderers I had ever defended.
As soon as you came into the room, I felt safe somehow, Mr. Rumpole. I knew Norman and I would be safe with you.
Norman? The child of the family. Miss Trant supplied the information. Thank you, Miss Trant. Mrs. Thrip, if I'm to help you, you'll have to do your best to help me out, too.
Anything. What is it you want exactly?
Well, my dear lady, a couple of black eyes had come in extremely handy, I said hopefully. Mrs. Thrip looked at Miss Trant, puzzled.
Mr. Rumpole means, has your husband ever used physical violence? Miss Trant explained. Well, no, not actual violence.
Pity. I commiserated with her. Mr. Thrip doesn't show a very helpful attitude. You see, if we're going to prove cruelty... we don't have to, do we? I noticed then that Miss Trant was sitting in front of a pile of legal textbooks. Intolerable conduct since the Divorce Law Reform Act, 1969. I thought then that it's not the frivolity that makes women intolerable. It's the ghastly enthusiasm. I could have managed that conference quite nicely without Miss Trant. Thank you, Miss Trant, for reminding me. Now then, what's this intolerable conduct exactly?
He doesn't speak,
Mrs. Thrip told me. Well, a little silence can come as something of a relief in the wear and tear of married life.
I don't think you understand, Mrs. Thrip smiled patiently. He hasn't spoken a word to me for 3 years.
3 years? Good God! How does he communicate? The instructing solicitor laid a number of little bits of paper on my desk. By means of notes. I then discovered that the man Thrip, who I was not in the least surprised to learn was a chartered accountant, used his matrimonial home as a sort of post office. When he wished to communicate with his wife, he typed out brusque and businesslike notes, documents which threw a blinding light, in my opinion, on the man's character. To my so-called wife, one note read, if you and your so-called son want to swim in hot water, you can go to the public baths from your so-called husband. This was fixed, it seemed, to a padlocked geyser. Another billet doux was found in the biscuit tin in the larder. To my so-called wife, I have removed what you left of the assorted tea biscuits to the office for safekeeping. Are you determined to eat me into bankruptcy? Your so-called husband. To my so-called wife, I'm going out to my Masonic Ladies' Night tomorrow, Wednesday. It's a pity I haven't got a lady to take with me. Don't bother to wait up for me. Your so-called husband, F. Thrip. I made 2 observations about this correspondence, one of which was that it revealed a depth of human misery which no reasonable woman would tolerate. The other was that all the accountant Thrip's notes were written on an Italian portable, about 10 years old.
My husband's got an old Olivetti. He can't really type, Mrs. Thrip told me.
Let me understand, I said to her. Are you interested in someone else?
Someone else?
Mrs. Thrip looked pained. Well, you're clearly an intelligent, obviously still a reasonably attractive woman. Are there not other fish in your particular sea?
Oh, one man's quite enough for me, thank you.
I see. Apparently you're still living with your husband.
Living with him? Of course I'm living with him. The flat's in our joint names.
Well, wouldn't you and the young hopeful outside be better off somewhere else? There's your mother in Ruislip. Mr. Perfect supplied the information. Thank you, Mr. Perfect. I turned back to Mrs. Thrip. As your solicitor points out, anyone's mother in Ruislip must surely be better than life with a chartered accountant who locks up the geezer and removes the tea biscuits to his office. There was a brief silence. Then Mrs. Thrip asked quietly, "Won't you take me on, Mr. Rumpole?" I thought of the rent, the enormous amounts of money she who must be obeyed spends on luxuries like vim. I also remembered the fact that crime seemed remarkably thin on the ground, and said, "Of course, dear lady, of course I'll take you on. Only it'd be a help if we knew exactly what destination you had in mind." "I've told Mr. Perfect what I want." "You want a divorce. Those are my instructions," Mr. Perfect said. But his client put it a little differently. "I want my husband taken to court. Those are my instructions, Mr. Rumpole." I have spoken in these reminiscences of my old friend George Frobisher. He's a gentle soul, unfitted by temperament for a knockabout career at the bar, but he is a pleasant companion for a drink at Pomeroy's after the heat and labour of the day. That evening I bought the first round, 2 large clarets, flushed with the remunerative collapse of the Thrip marriage. "Things are looking up, George." I raised my glass to my old friend, and he in turn toasted me. "Yes, a little. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. Today I got a £150 brief for a divorce." "Oh, that's funny. So did I." George sounded puzzled. "Sure to last at least 6 days. 6 refreshers at £50 a day. Think of it, George. Well, there's that much to be said for the institution of marriage." "I never felt the need of marriage, somehow," George told me. "I really can't see why a person puts up with marriage. When a woman starts conversing with her husband by means of little notes—" "Oh, got one of those, have you?" I looked at him curiously. There seemed to be an epidemic of matrimonial note-leaving. "And she cut off the ends of his trousers." George seemed deeply shocked. He was going to an evening at his lodge. You know what this Jezebel did? Only snipped off the ends of his evening trousers with nail scissors. "Ah, intolerable conduct, that, you know, under the 1969 Act." I kept George abreast of the law. Moss Bros was closed. The wretched fellow had to turn up at the Café Royal with bags that looked as if they'd been gnawed by rats. Well, that's marriage for you. Thank God I live by myself in the Royal Borough Hotel. Well, I expect you're as snug as a bug in there, aren't you, George? Oh, we have television in the residence lounge now. Coloured television. And look here, you must dine with me there one night, Rumpole. Bring Hilda if you'd care to. Oh, we'd like to, George. Coloured television. Well, I say, that'll be a treat. I must admit that George Frobisher and I loitered a little in Pomeroy's that night, and when I got home, Hilda had apparently gone up to bed. I went into the kitchen and switched on the light. All was quiet on the western front, but I saw on the table a note from my lady wife. "If you condescend to come home, your dinner's in the oven." I took the hint and was removing the red-hot plate of congealed stew from the bowels of our ancient cooker when the telephone rang in the living room. I went to answer it and heard a woman's voice. "I just had to ring you. I feel so alone in the world, so terribly alone." "Look, it's not very convenient just now. It was my client in the case of Thrip v. Thrip." "Don't say that. It's my life. How can you say it's not convenient?" "All right, then, a quick word." "He's going to say the most terrible things about me. I've got to see you." "Well, shall we say tomorrow at 4 o'clock? "I don't know how I can wait." "Well, you've waited for 3 years, haven't you? Look forward to seeing you then. Good night now, beloved lady." I said that, I suppose, to cheer up Mrs. Thrip, and to soften the blow as I put down the receiver. Just before I did so, I heard a little click, and remembered that Hilda had insisted on an extension in our bedroom. The next day, Henry presented me with another brief. A mere 25 guineas this time, to be heard by old Archie McPhee, the Dock Street magistrate. "You're an old girl called Mrs. Wainscott, sir," Henry told me, "charged with keeping a disorderly house." An old pro? Is this what I've sunk to now, Henry? Plodding the pavements, flogging my aged charms round the Dock Street magistrate's court? I checked the figure on the front of the brief. 25 smackers. Oh, not bad, I suppose, for a short time in Dock Street. Makes you wonder what I could earn round the West End. I left Henry then. He seemed not to be amused. The other side, that is to say, Mr. F. Thrip and his legal advisers, had supplied his wife, married in some far-off and rash moment in a haze of champagne and orange blossoms, with the evidence to be used against her. I was somewhat dismayed when I discovered that this evidence included an equal number of notes typed on the same old Olivetti as that used by the husband, but travelling in the opposite direction. I picked out one at random. "To my so-called husband, if you want your shirts washed, take them down to the office and let her do them for you. She does everything else for you, doesn't she? Your so-called wife." Oh, dear Mrs. Thrip, I wish you hadn't written this. By the way, whom do you suspect of doing his washing for him? He has a secretary. There doesn't seem to be anyone else. He alleges you assaulted his trousers. No, I didn't do that, Mr. Rumpole. Well, his evening trousers were damaged, apparently. Probably at the cleaner's. You remember he refused to take me to his ladies' night. He went on his own, so his trousers can't have been all that bad, can they? Did you mind him going? I was finding the Thrip marriage more and more mysterious. Mind? Of course I minded. Why? Because I wanted to go with him, of course. You wanted to go with a man who hasn't spoken to you for 3 years, who communicates by wretched little notes, who locks up your bath-water? At this point, Mrs. Thrip brought out a small lace handkerchief and started to sob. All right, Mrs. Thrip, I'm simply asking the questions your husband's barrister will ask, unless we're extremely unlucky. You think my case is hopeless? Mrs. Thrip was mopping up noisily. Mr. Rumpole's afraid you may not make a good witness. It was Miss Phillida Trant, giving her learned opinion uninvited. Miss Trant, I'm afraid I was somewhat sharp with her. You may know all about divorce law reform acts, but I know all about witnesses. Mrs. Thrip will be excellent in the box. Well done, Mrs. Thrip. You broke down at exactly the right stage of the cross-examination. I picked up the first of the wretched chartered accountant's notes. I was by now looking forward to blasting him out of the witness box. I am going to my Masonic ladies' night. It's a pity I haven't got a lady to take with me, I read out loud. There's not a man sitting as a judge in the family division who won't find that note from your husband absolutely intolerable. When the Thrips, mère et fille, had been shepherded out by their solicitor, perfect, Miss Trant loitered and said she wanted my advice. It seems that she'd been entrusted with a brief for the prosecution before the great tribunal, old Archibald McPhee at the Dock Street Magistrates' Court. It's a disorderly house. I mean, it's an open and shut case. I can't think why Mrs. Wainscott's defending. Well, the old trot's probably got a weird taste for keeping out of Holloway. I blew out smoke, savouring a bit of fun in the offing. Fate had decreed that I should be prosecuted by Miss Phillida Trant. I kept cunningly quiet about my interest in the case of the police v. Wainscott, and Erskine Brown's former pupil proceeded to deliver herself into my hands. What I want to ask you was how much law should I take? I mean, how many books will this magistrate want on the prosecution case? Miss Trant had asked for it. I stood and gave her my learned opinion. My dear Miss Trant, old Archie McPhee is a legal beaver. Double first in jurisprudence. Reads Russell on crime in bed and the appeal cases on holiday. You want to pot the old bawdy housekeeper? Quote every case you can think of. Archie will love you for it. How many books do you need? My advice to you is, fill the taxi. So we all gathered at Dock Street Magistrates' Court. There was old Mother Wainscot sitting beneath a pile of hennaed hair in the dock. There was old Archie McPhee, looking desperately bored and gazing yearningly at the clock as Miss Trant, with a huge pile of dusty law books in front of her and her glasses on the end of her nose, lectured him endlessly on the law relating to disorderly houses. Section 8 of the 1751 statute, sir. Any person who acts or behaves him or herself as master or mistress, or as the person having the care, government, or management of any bawdy house or other disorderly house, shall be deemed to be the keeper thereof. Now, if I might refer you to Singleton and Ellison, 1895, 1 QB, page 607. The learned magistrate sighed heavily. I sat smiling quietly like a happy spider as Miss Trant walked into the web. She had looked shocked when she discovered that I was defending. Now she would discover that I had deceived her. Archie McPhee couldn't stand law. His sole interests were rose-growing amateur dramatics and catching the 3:45 back to Esher. It is interesting to observe that in Rex v. Jones it was held that all women under 21 years of age are girls, although females may be women at the age of 18. Turning now, if you please, sir, to the Sexual Offences Act, 1896. A very long time later, when it came to my turn and the prosecution had sunk under the dead weight of the law, I made a speech guaranteed to get old Archie off to the station in 3 minutes flat. Sir, my learned friend has referred you to many books. I would only remind you of one, a well-known book in which it is written, "Thou shalt not bear false witness." I glared at the young officer in charge of the case, and I would apply that remark to the alleged observations of the police officer. Yes, I'm not satisfied this charge is made out. Summons dismissed. As Archie went, he fired his parting shot. With costs, Miss Trant. Mrs. Thrip rang me at home again that evening and told me that her solicitor perfect had fixed up a hearing in 10 days' time. She wondered how she could live until then, and told me that I was her only friend in the world. I was comforting her as best I could and stemming the threatened flow of tears over the wire by saying, "You'll be free in a couple of weeks. Think of that, old darling," when I noticed that Hilda had come into the room and was viewing me with a look of disapproval. I put down the phone. I suppose to a hostile observer the movement may have looked guilty. However, she who must be obeyed affected to ignore it and said casually, "I'm having tea with Dodo tomorrow." Dodo? Dodo Perkins and I were tremendously close at Wickham Abbey, said Hilda coldly. She's living in Devon nowadays. She's running her own tea shop. Oh, well, nice part, Devon. You won't have seen her for some years. We correspond. I sent her a postcard and said, "Let's meet when you're next up in London." She gave me a look I can only describe as meaningful. I want to ask her advice about something. We may do some shopping and have tea at Harrods. Dodo never liked you. Did you know that, Rumpole? She went, leaving me only vaguely disconcerted. When I went to the gin bottle, however, to prepare an evening booths and tonic, I was astonished to notice a pencil mark on the label, apparently intended to record the drinking habits of Rumpole. I sloshed out the spirit well past the Plimsoll line. Our existence in Froxbury Court, I thought, was beginning to bear an uncomfortable resemblance to the way life was lived in Maison Rip. When I got to chambers the next morning, I found Miss Phillida Trant in my room, her glasses off, her eyes red, and her voice exceedingly doleful. She announced that after careful thought she had decided, in view of her disastrous appearance at the Dock Street Magistrates' Court, to give up the bar and take up some less demanding profession.
And after you'd been so helpful.
Miss Trant's undeserved gratitude gave me an unusual twinge of guilt. Oh, please, don't mention it. I wanted to get her off the subject of my unhelpful advice.
I know I'll never make it. I mean, I know the law. I was top student of my year.
I interrupted her and said, being a lawyer's got almost nothing to do with knowing the law.
An open and shut case. I had all the police observations, and I went and lost it.
That wasn't because you didn't know all about the law. It was because you didn't know enough about Archie McPhee.
You just made rings round me.
Never underestimate the craftiness of Rumpole. Now I was giving her genuinely helpful advice.
It seems ungrateful, after you'd been so kind to me. Oh, I wish you wouldn't go on saying that, Miss Trant. But I'll have to give it up.
You can't. Once you're a lawyer, you're addicted. You'll find out.
No, I won't, ever.
I found myself warming to Miss Trant. For some reason, I wanted her to continue her struggle against magistrates and judges and cunning opponents. Even her appearance at Dock Street had shown some misguided courage. You know, we all have our disappointments. I do.
You?
She looked incredulous. One year I did the Penge Bungalow murder without a leader, and the Great Brighton Benefit Club forgery case, which is where I got my vast knowledge of typewriters. And what am I doing now? Playing around with disorderly houses. I have even sunk to divorce. I looked at her and saw a solution. You know what your mistake is, in court, I mean. Miss Trant shook her head. I would suggest a little more of the feminine qualities. Ask anyone in the Temple. How does Rumpole carry on in court? Answer. Rumpole woos, Rumpole insinuates, Rumpole winds his loving fingers around the jury box, or lies on his back, purring, if your lordship pleases. I was rewarded with a small smile as she said, oh, that's ridiculous. Lawyers and tarts, I told her, and I meant it, are the two oldest professions in the world, and we always aim to please. If I had managed to cheer up Miss Trant and even return her small nose to the legal grindstone, I had no luck with she who must be obeyed. Relations, as they say, deteriorated, and I got up one morning to find her suitcase packed and standing in the hall. Hilda was in the living room, hatted, coated, and ready for travel. You can come home as late as you like now, Rumpole. And you can spend all the time you like with her. Her? Whoever could she be talking about? I've heard her, time and time again, on the telephone. Oh, don't be ridiculous. I tried a light laugh. That's a client. Rumpole, I've lived with you for a good many years. Man and boy, I said. And I've never known you to be telephoned by a client. At home. I usually have quiet, undemanding clients. Murderers don't fuss. Robbers can usually guess the outcome, so they're calm and resigned. Divorcing ladies are different. They're inclined to telephone constantly. So I've noticed. I'm going to stay with Dodo and help her out with the business. It's far better I leave you, Rumpole, to enjoy your harem. Listen, Hilda. I did my best to remain calm. I have a client whose unhappy marriage may well provide you and Dodo with another tea in Harrods. That can't be why you're leaving. There was one of those silences that had become so frequent between us, and then she said, No, it isn't. Then why? You've changed, Rumpole. You don't go to work in the mornings. And as for the gin bottle, yes, you marked it. That was unforgivable. Then don't forgive me. At which point the phone rang. Hilda picked it up, apparently thinking it was a taxi that she'd ordered. But it was, of course, Mrs. Thrip, the well-known married lady, who seemed to depend entirely on Rumpole. Hilda handed me the phone as though her worst suspicions were now thoroughly justified. Hilda went while I was still pacifying the client. In the days that followed, I stayed later at Pomeroy's, got my own breakfast, had a poached egg in the evenings, and turned up alone and unaccompanied to have dinner with George Frobisher at the Royal Borough Hotel in Kensington. We sat in a draughty dining room, surrounded by lonely persons whose tables were littered with their personal possessions. It was the sort of place that encourages talking in whispers, so George and I muttered over the coffee, getting such warmth as we could from our thimblefuls of port. "I'm sorry it's not Thursday," George told me sadly. "They give us the chicken on Thursday. Tonight it was the veal, so it must be Monday. Enjoy your pomme de terre à l'anglaise, did you?" "Boiled spuds, yeah, excellent. Oh, Hilda will be sorry she missed this." "Hilda cares for veal, does she? We always get veal on Mondays, so we know where we are." George suddenly remembered something. "Monday? Good God! I've got this divorce case tomorrow. The other side stole a march on us. They expedited the hearing." "George." "Yes, Rumpole. What's your divorce about exactly?" "Well, I told you I'm a husband tomorrow." "Well, it's just that, I've got one too, you know," I confessed. "I'm a wife." Horrible case. Think I told you. We allege this monstrous female savaged my trousers. Furthermore, she hasn't spoken to me for 3 years.
"She hasn't spoken to you?"
Well, she started it. Now that's a damned lie, George. I felt a sense of outrage on behalf of Mrs. Thrip and raised my voice. A nearby diner looked up from his soup of the day. "Oh, really? And is it a damned lie about the bathwater?" "Well, what about the bathwater?" "You ran off all the hot water deliberately. You put a note on the geyser, out of bounds."
"I haven't had a bath there for the last month. I have to go all the way to Ruislip to my mother's."
"Rumpole, you're against me."
"Of course I'm against you. I'm the wife. You want to turn me out of the house and my child."
"Your child? You alienated Norman's affections."
"What?"
"You turned him against me." It's no doubt a strange habit of barristers to identify themselves so closely with their clients. But by now we had both raised our voices, and the other diners were listening but looking studiously away, as though they were overhearing a domestic quarrel.
"That is the most pernicious rubbish I've ever heard, and if you dare to put that forward in court, I shall cut you in small pieces and give it to the usher. I behaved like a saint. You are nothing but a great big bully, George. Oh, you're all very fine and brave when you've got someone weaker than yourself."
"You? Weaker than me? I've told you you're a Jezebel."
"Bluebeard."
"Lady Macbeth."
Let's just see how you stand up in court, George. Let's just see how you stand up to cross-examination."
"Don't rely on cross-examination. It's the evidence that matters. By the way, I'm making my evening trousers an exhibit." At this startling news, the other diners had given up all pretense of not listening, and were gazing at each other with a wild surmise. I wasn't taking these allegations against my wrong client lying down.
"Anyone, George, can lacerate their own evening trousers with a pair of nail scissors. It's been done before. Thank you for the dinner."
I left the dining room then, with all the diners staring at me. When I got home and poured myself an unlimited gin, I began to wonder exactly what they had thought of my relationship with my old friend George Frobisher. When I had rashly advised Mrs. Thrip that there wasn't a man sitting as a judge who wouldn't be appalled at hearing of her treatment at the hands of Thrip, I had made a serious miscalculation. I had forgotten that Mrs. Justice Appleby sat in the family division of the High Court of Justice, and her ladyship was known as the only genuine male chauvinist pig in the building. If the judge was an unpleasant surprise, Mr. F. Thrip was a disappointment. He was hardly ideal casting for the part of Bluebeard. In fact, he looked decidedly meek and mild, a small man in rimless glasses and a nervous smile. We could have hoped for something about twice the size. The clerk called the case, and we were off. I rose to open a tale whose lightest word would harrow up the soul and freeze the young blood. I weighed in on a high note. This is one of the strangest cases this court may ever have heard. The case of a Bluebeard who kept his wife a virtual prisoner in their flat at Muswell Hill, who denied her the simple comforts of biscuits and bathwater, who never gave her the comfort of his conversation and communicated with her by means of brusque and insulting little notes. Mr. Rumpole. Mrs. Justice Appleby looked unimpressed. May I remind you of something? The jury box is empty. This is a trial by judge alone. I don't require to be swayed by your oratory, which no doubt is enormously effective in criminal cases. Just give me the relevant dates, would you? I gave her the dates, and then I called my client. After a gentle introduction, I put her husband's notes to her. You and your so-called son can be off to your mother's in Ruislip. Let her pay for the light you leave blazing in the toilet. What was the effect on you, Mrs. Thrip, of that heart-breaking notice to quit? She stayed for more, apparently. It was Mrs. Justice Appleby answering my question. She turned to the witness box with that cold disapproval women reserve especially for each other. Well, you didn't go, did you? Why not? I didn't know what he would do if I left him. Mrs. Thrip was looking at her husband. I was puzzled to see that the look wasn't entirely hostile, but the judge was after her like a terrier. Mrs. Thrip, you put up with this intolerable conduct from your husband for 3 years. Why, exactly? I suppose I was sorry for him. I thought he'd never manage on his own. When we came out for lunch, I saw Norman waiting outside the court. He had a brand-new armoured car with flashing lights, a mounted machine gun, and detachable soldiers in battle dress. Somebody was doing well from this case, apart from Rumpole and George Frobisher. In the afternoon, I cross-examined the respondent, Thrip. Mr. Thrip, is there anything in your conduct to your wife of which you are thoroughly ashamed? In the pause while Thrip examined this poser, I whispered to Miss Trant, my eager apprentice. Good question, then. If he says yes, he's made a damaging admission. If he says no, he's a self-satisfied idiot. At which point Thrip said no, proving himself a self-satisfied idiot. Oh, really, Mr. Thrip, you have behaved absolutely perfectly. I am going out to my Masonic ladies' night. It's a pity I haven't got a lady to take with me. I was quoting from the Thrip correspondence. Is that the way a perfect husband writes to his wife? Well, perhaps not, but I was annoyed with her, you see. I had asked her to the ladies' night. Asked her? Well, I left a note for her, naturally. She didn't reply. Tell me, Mr. Thrip, did you actually want your wife to accompany you to the Masonic ladies' night? Oh, yes, indeed. You were looking forward to spending a pleasant evening with her? Well, I had no one else to go with. And would rather go with her than with no one? Well, of course I would. She's my wife, isn't she? Mr. Thrip, I suggest all your charges against her are quite untrue. They are not untrue. But you wanted her with you. You wanted to flaunt her on your arm at the Café Royal. Why? Now, come, Mr. Thrip, will you answer that question? It can hardly have been because you love her. There was a long pause. I began to have an uneasy suspicion that I had asked one question too many. Then I knew I had, because Mr. Thrip said in the sort of matter-of-fact tone he might have used to announce the annual audit, Yes, I do. I do love her. I looked across at Mrs. Thrip. She was sighing with a sort of satisfaction, as if she had achieved her object at last. "Mr. Rumpole!" Mrs. Justice Appleby's voice, like a cold shower, woke me from my reverie. "Is it really too late for common sense to prevail? Could there not be one final attempt at a reconciliation?" I felt a sinking in the pit of the stomach. Could it be that even divorce was slipping away from us, and George and I would both have to go back to the crossword puzzle? "I have no power to order this." The judge did her best to look pleasant. It was not a wild success. "But it does seem to me that Mr. and Mrs. Thrip might meet perhaps in counsel's chambers, simply to explore the possibilities of a reconciliation. There is one very important consideration, of course, and I refer to young Norman Thrip, the child of the family. I shall adjourn now until tomorrow morning." At which her ladyship rose smartly, and we were all upstanding in court. Obedient to Mrs. Justice Appleby's orders, the Thrips met in my room that afternoon. George Frobisher and I, our differences now sunk in the face of the new menace from the judge, shared my small cigars and our anxieties. "They've been in there a long time." George was looking nervously at the closed door. "I'm afraid it doesn't look too healthy." Just then the clerk's room door opened for Henry to come out about some business. I had a brief glimpse of Norman Thrip, the child of the family, seated at Diane's desk. He was banging the keys of our old Standard Imperial, no doubt playing at secretaries. "In my opinion," George was still grumbling, "they shouldn't allow women on the bench. That Mrs. Justice Appleby, what does she think she's doing, depriving us of our refreshers?" Before I could agree wholeheartedly, the door of my room opened to let out a beaming Thrip. "Well, gentlemen," he said, "I think we'll be withdrawing the case tomorrow. We still have one or two things to talk over." "Talk over? Well, that'll be a change," said Mrs. Thrip, following him out. Then they collected Norman, who was still happily playing with Diane's typewriter, and took him home, leaving George and I in a state of gloomy suspense. The next morning I got to the law courts early, climbed into the fancy dress, and found Mrs. Thrip and young Norman waiting for me outside Mrs. Justice Appleby's forum in the family division. "Well, Mrs. Thrip, I suppose we come to bury Caesar, not to praise him." "What do you mean, Mr. Rumpole?" "You're dropping the case." Mrs. Thrip, to my surprise, was shaking her head and opening a handbag. She brought out a piece of paper and handed it to me, her voice tremulous with indignation. "No, Mr. Rumpole," she said. "I'm going on with the case. I got this morning, leaning up against the cornflakes packet at breakfast." I took the note from her. "The old barrister you've dug up's going to lose this case. I'll have you and your so-called son out of here in a week. Your so-called husband." I read the typewritten document, and then studied it with more care. "He's mad, that's what he is. I can't live with a maniac, Mr. Rumpole. We've got to beat him. I've got to think of Norman, caged up with a man like that." "Yes, Norman." I pulled out my watch. "We've got a quarter of an hour. I feel the need of a coffee. Do you think Norman would like a doughnut?" "Oh, I'm sure we'd be glad to." "Not we, Mrs. Thrip. In this instance, I think I'd like to see young Norman on his own." I took Norman down to the cafe in the crypt of the law courts, and as he tucked into a doughnut and fizzy orangeade, I brought the conversation round to the business in hand. Rum business, marriage. You've never been married, have you, Norman?" "Of course not." Norman found the idea amusing. "No, seriously. Married people have odd ways of showing their love and affection. Some whisper endearments, some send each other abusive notes. Some even have to get as far as the divorce court to prove that they can't do without each other. You were all right, weren't you, Norman, when they really looked like separating?" "I don't know what you mean." When they were both trying to win you over to their side. When you got a present a week from Mum and a rival present from Dad. Tanks, planes, guns. It's been a sort of arms race between them, hasn't it, Norman? Oh, I don't mind if they get together. It's their business, isn't it? Yes, Norman, their business. Well, I'm not stopping them. I ordered the child another donut. He was going to need it. Oh, really? Well, of course not. The second donut came, and I gave Norman a fragment of my autobiography. I don't do much divorce, you know, crime mainly. I was in the Great Brighton Benefit Club forgery. What's forgery? The child was round-eyed with innocence. You had to admire the act. Oh, you're good, Norman. You come out wonderfully in your interviews with the police. The genuine voice of innocence. What's forgery? I whipped out the latest item in the Thrip correspondence. This is... Inspect it carefully, Norman. All the other notes were typewritten. Well, so is this. Norman kept his head. The others were done on the old Olivetti your parents keep in Muswell Hill. This morning's note was typed on a standard imperial with a small gap in the capital S. Typed on the imperial on which Diane in my chambers hammers out my so-called learned opinions. Norman was staring at me, but he said nothing. The typewriter you were playing with so innocently yesterday in the clerk's room. I put it to you, Norman. You typed that last note in a desperate attempt to keep this highly profitable divorce case going. Norman said, I didn't see any gap in the capital S. Didn't you, Norman? The judge will. What judge? For the first time he sounded rattled. The judge who tries you for forgery, a word you understand perfectly. I'll take the evidence now. I retrieved the last incriminating note. 4 years they gave the chief villain in the Brighton case. They wouldn't. Norman looked at me. I felt almost sorry for him, as if he were my client. As your lawyer, Norman, I can see only one way out for you. A full confession to your mum and dad. He bit hard into the second donut, seriously considering the possibility. And one more word of advice, Norman. Settle for being a chartered accountant. You've got absolutely no talent for crime. When I got back to the mansions, I found Hilda's case in the hall, and she, apparently just arrived and still in her overcoat, installed wearily in her chair by the simulated coals of our electric fire. Oh, what's the matter? Fallen out with Dodo? Had a bit of a scene over a drop scone? You're home early. Daddy was never back home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He always stayed in chambers till 6 o'clock. Regular as clockwork, every day of his life. Oh, my divorce collapsed under me. I lit a small cigar. You're going to seed, Rumpole. You hang about at home in the mornings. You know why my divorce collapsed. The clients were reconciled. Because however awful it is, however silent and unendurable, however much they may hate each other's guts and quarrel over the use of the geyser, they don't want to be alone. Isn't that strange, Hilda? They'd rather have war together than a lonely peace. If I'd stayed away any longer, you'd have gone to seed completely. She started to make the room ship-shape, a long-neglected task. Oh, woman, in our hours of ease. I got to my feet and gave her the snatch of Walter Scott again. Uncertain, coy, and hard to please. You'd have stayed home from chambers all day, doing the crossword and delving into the gin bottle. And variable as the shade by the light of quivering aspens made. I crushed out my cigar and moved to the door. If you're going to the loo, Rumpole, try to remember to switch the light off. When pain and anguish wring the brow, a ministering angel thou. I was halfway down the passage when I heard she calling after me. It's for your own good, Rumpole. I'm telling you, for your own good.